Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders SFX. If reading that title makes you think that this game, in fact, uses the FX chip, well, get in line. Whereas if you're one of the few people who thinks this game has nothing to do with the FX chip, well, congratulations, you're smarter than the rest of us. And I say that because I went in and bought this game under a certain assumption. See, I remember when I was a kid seeing this fighting game that used 2D sort of anime style characters fighting in a 2D environment. However, if you hit your opponent hard enough, that 2D environment would like rotate, and it would actually be a 3D environment that just looked really, really close to 2D hand-drawn animation. And I have no idea what that game is. I bought this game thinking it was that, and it's not. But this game is in fact a super kick-ass fighting game. But it's also more than a fighting game. It takes the term Battle Tycoon and actually makes that mean something. See, it's a combination sort of fighting game, sort of RPG, sort of management sim of all things. And I think it works really well for what it is. Now, it being entirely in Japanese and primarily a fighting game, I don't think there's really much of a story here, but you select your chosen fighter, and like some sort of virtual pet, you have to train them to be the greatest virtual gladiator ever. And that's where this game sort of kicks off. You have to explore this town, going to various areas, and ultimately sort of scheduling fights. You can go to item shops and buy weapons and armor for your character to boost their stats. You can then just go pick random fights to train your character, and as the day and night cycle that this game has, which is really kind of interesting even though it's really underutilized, as the day and night cycle progresses, eventually you'll have to go to the actual proper Coliseum and put to the test what you've learned and what you've given your gladiator to do. The core idea being that essentially you go in and you pick street fights with any of the other characters, which are all independently leveled and built slightly differently from one another, so they're actually realistically training as well. You challenge them, and should you beat them, your stats increase a little. You get a few more skill points and some money, which you can put towards buying better gear and armor. Well, you just keep doing that until you have to actually properly go up against the gladiatorial fight. And I think that's genuinely interesting, that as you go along, each of the characters levels separately, each of the characters is built slightly differently, and each one will provide you with a different challenge. Now, I'm terrible at fighting games, so I'm playing this on the easiest mode, but that said, there's still a lot of difficulty here. And I mean, there's like 6 different difficulty modes, one of them labeled Metal, which is like the coolest thing ever. People take note of this, because you will be quizzed at the end. But you can also modify the difficulty further by simply choosing enemies that have a significantly higher level than you, because these levels actually mean something. They delineate your experience and your stats, and what's really cool is before every fight, you can modify your stats. Yeah, this is where it sort of becomes a bit of an RPG, because as you level, you gain more skill points, and your skill points allow you to put a temporary boost in any of your 3 skills: attack, defense, and speed. And if you don't like how you mixed them in the previous fight, well, don't worry, because your skill points allocation resets every time. But that said, as you level up your character, your standard natural skills also get a boost, so you're always improving, and you always feel like you're working towards attaining a better fighter. And speaking of speed, that's a tricky stat to put a lot of points in, because this game feels very, very fast. With the exception of maybe 2 characters, which at least one of them felt kind of like a joke character to me, this game plays incredibly fast and fluid for a fighting game, and that's quite enjoyable. Every character feels a little bit different, they have their own sort of unique specific styles, but each one of them has their own abilities to get them to attack different ranges and zone opponents out if they need to. In fact, every character has like half a dozen special moves, all allocated to them, which on the Super Nintendo, that's pretty impressive. I mean, again, I'm terrible at these games, and I have trouble pulling off even the most basic attacks without, just randomly button mashing, but still, there are a crap ton of special abilities that allow you to basically hit any enemy in any situation, if you're able to pull them off. And I think this game does like to put an emphasis on special abilities, because special abilities hit like an absolute truck. I've seen my character go from about full health to about a third of her health in about 1 hit. Special abilities can really turn the tide of a fight if you know what you're doing. And really, that's all there is to it. It's all about setting up your fights, it's all about managing your time and figuring out what you need to do at each different interval of the day, as well as then utilizing the fruits of your labor by building up your gladiator to suit your specific combat styles. And that allows for a lot of customization and different ways to play this game. Sure, you could focus entirely on attack like I did because I didn't want to be going super fast, and I found a great deal of success in doing that. But if you like a really fast fighting game, well, you can pick one of the really fast characters, sink all your points into speed, and you will be moving faster than lightning and no opponent will be able to touch you. And that's awesome too. And I think that's really what makes this game great. Sure, there's that sort of experimental feel of sort of management sim, sort of fighting game, sort of RPG thing going on, but it's really the fact that it lets you approach it any way you want that is really interesting and well developed, I think. Now, the presentation to Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders SFX is really good. In fact, offhand, I can only think of one complaint, and that's visually. Visually, the game looks fantastic, the levels are tremendous, they're well detailed, and so are the characters. The only thing I really don't like about it, and it's mostly with the portraits, but some of it bleeds into the character design as well, is a few characters look basically identical with the exception of a palette swap. And again, this is mostly with the portraits, not the actual character models or anything, but when you're selecting your character, it's kind of hard to tell, okay, am I going to be that fist fighter guy or am I going to be the guy who uses magic? Because they look identical except one of them is purple. And for a game that has maybe 10 characters in it, to resort to what is essentially recolors, that's a bit weak. But everything else visually is great, and again, that one problem is really pretty much just with selecting your character. And audio-wise, well, honestly, the audio is largely forgettable, as in I genuinely do not remember any of it. That said, I think the gameplay itself was the focus, and in that regard, it did that very well. And you have some nice visuals as well, so overall, it really focused on its strengths, so it's not like that really is too much of a detractor. Now, if you want a copy of Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders SFX on the Super Famicom, well, it's going to cost you about $20 to $30, and at that price, I'd say grab it. It's probably the best fighting game I've played on the Super Nintendo. And I've played a few, but this one is probably the fastest paced, the most fluid, and genuinely the most fun, and probably one of the best looking ones as well. And the fact that it tries to experiment with its gameplay styles over other fighting games, and the fact that it does it in a way that doesn't really detract from anything, is just a huge bonus and makes this a really unique game. I really like this game. Ultimately, well, Battle Tycoon Flash Hiders SFX was not the fighting game I was looking for, and I still have no idea what that fighting game was. I may have found what is quite possibly one of the best fighting games on the system, easily at this point my favorite. And you know, if you're a fighting game fan or you just want to see a different take on a fighting game, this one's definitely worth keeping an eye out for, because it is a really fun time. This game delivers a knockout punch, or in my case, a giant slash with a freaking awesome katana. See, there's nothing about this game that isn't awesome, because as that difficulty level will tell you, this game is freaking metal.